Welcome to Buckets, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer. Very glad to be joined on this Futures Friday episode by Brandon Anderson, NBA futures analyst. 'Tis the season, Brandon. We're not going to talk for a couple of weeks as you're heading off on holiday vacation. I've got lots of holiday stuff to do. But on this December, we're recording this on Thursday, December 15th, but you're listening to this on Friday, December 16th. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Tis the season. We are only a week out, barely, from NBA Christmas, which is always very exciting, especially, I know for a lot of fans. For me as a kid growing up, NBA Christmas was effectively the start of the season, right? Like football is winding down, college games are ending, and that's when you kind of tune in. We already been making money for a couple months on basketball games, but and, the audience gets a little wider. We get these marquee games coming up and get a whole day of basketball. We even cleared NFL mostly out of the way. There's 3 games left, but they gave us like the coal in our stockings NFL games. They threw your local Broncos on, so you can skip that one. Broncos Rams mid-afternoon with a look-ahead total of 35.5. So feel free to schedule your NBA day accordingly. So yeah, doing well. Excited for some family time, holidays, and some NBA Christmas. And, we're settling in. We got a long season to go. So it's kind of a fun time to check in.
Christmas slate's looking pretty good, except for the marquee game, the Memphis Golden State game, because Steph's going to miss a few weeks. We'll talk about that at the end of the episode because I've got a play related to Steph. We'll talk about his situation, but Christmas slate's looking pretty good. I did want to make a note for the listeners because on best bets for Wednesday, which was last night, if I'm able to keep track of the space-time continuum, I had a good night. Right. So I took Orlando money line and spread, and that hit. I took Thunder spread and money line. Spread hit, money line did not. Whiffed on the Raptors because we got to talk about them. Oh boy, that game. that game. I do want to note that on a lot of these plays that I make on best bets where I'm taking a dog, especially if I'm doing the half unit money line play, if the team that I'm backing gets out to a big lead, I am going to buy back. Like, I am going to ensure profit or at least even. That's how I bet. Like, I am not confident enough in, like, they should be able to hold this lead. That is not how my brain works in the NBA. I have seen it too many times. And so if you follow me in the Action Network app and you turn on those notifications, you're going to, like, see stuff like I bought back on Atlanta twice. Now, that one didn't cash. I should have bought back on Heat, but I was at the Nuggets game and got distracted. So I'm doing a lot of that. You don't have to, because again, like the spread plays, they worked and they killed it. My spread plays are very good this season, but just as a reminder that I am not done. If I take a favorite, I'm usually done. If I take a dog, especially on the money line, I am looking for opportunities to come back the other way. You don't have to. I'm just telling you that's what I do. So if you check the app later and you're like, wait, how did you, what? And I'll lose ROI on it because like with the Hawks game, I was just like, nope, don't trust the Magic to hold a 9-point lead in the third quarter. And, they got it done. And that's encouraging. And that's a data point. But just wanted to kind of put that out there as like a reason to follow in the award-winning Action Network app. Best way for you to track your picks, etc. You've been doing that a little bit only, Brandon. I love it because you're so much more of a confident and better than I am. Because like on NFL, you'll have a play and then they'll go down and you'll be like, yeah, I'm buying again. Like, no, they're winning this game. And so Brandon's a great follow for live NFL as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to watch on the app because there are times, especially with NFL, I'm on these look ahead and hot read spots where I'm playing, a week or 10 days in advance. Well, sometimes we had one where I bet on Pittsburgh 4.5 against Baltimore plus 4.5. And then Lamar Jackson got hurt and we ended up -3 on Steelers. Yeah. And we got to come back on the other side. And that one, I middled the heck out of it. We grand slammed a close one, a close game outcome. But there are other games too. There are games where you get out on a look ahead. Maybe you got your NBA Christmas bet in already. Those lines have been up for, I think, since the season started. And now Steph is hurt. And you're like, well, shoot, what do I do here? So there are times where you maybe want to play a middle, or maybe you just want to just get out at times. I've had times where I've had to buy out of a look ahead or bought out of a portion of it and been like, you know what? I still like this team, but I don't love them anymore. Let me get out of one of the 1.5 units that bet on this. So when you're betting, like you said, the Hawks Magic, just to clarify, when you're buying out or by buying back, I should say, are you buying back on the money line so that you're basically like, what's the process, or what is your goal outcome of what you're trying to accomplish there usually?
So like the key objective would be to try and get, you want to try and manage your decision of whether, for me, of whether or not to try and go for profit either way is based off of how likely you think the outcome is, right? So like last night when I went back on the Hawks, I got the Hawks at plus 225. Okay. And that bet covered my money line half unit play, right?
And what was
Like
the money line going in that you started with?
plus one plus a bit a half unit at plus 135.
Okay.
Okay. So and then I come back on the Hawks at half of that bet for plus 225. So I cover the investment and get a little bit of the extra there. And then I bought back again at plus 875 in the third quarter, just for 0.1 of a unit, because that way, if they came all the way back and covered the spread, now I'm taking care of not all, but most of my investment on the spread. So I'm not knocking off enough of my profit margin. I made money on that game with the Magic because I still thought like, I think the Magic are going to win this game, but I'm not so confident as to not come back a little bit on Atlanta because this is the NBA. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of
well, it's interesting as I think about it, because you're right. I don't do that a whole lot, especially in game, especially right now for NBA. But really, the process that you're describing is a lot of what I'm doing in the futures market. It's just that my market lasts for 4 months and yours lasts for 2 hours. But either way, futures are not necessarily, as we get to some of them here, about here's my spot, I'm locking in. As you know, I used to be more like that. When we started out a couple of years ago, I would try to just lock in a spot and then like build my home there. And some of my best plays so far in the football season have been complete reverses to an early position. My whole Seattle Island thing, I was dumping on the Seahawks at the start of the season. I had them for worst record in the NFL, but sometimes in the futures market, you have long enough, you can kind of adjust your position along the way, or kind of like what you're doing, a version of buying back on the Hawks money line is building out your portfolio, building your futures portfolio and grabbing, okay, let me get this ticket where it's low, but I'm going to grab another ticket to add to that later probably and give myself multiple outs here. And that's where I think the futures market can be fun, because I'm not as good as you at spotting those moments during the night and in a 2-hour window, grabbing the right spot. I tend to not do that well when I try it. But over the 4 months or 7,000 months, whatever each NBA season is, you can kind of find your right spots there.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and use that transition to talk about some futures. We're going to do buy low, sell high on the Eastern Conference. We did Western Conference last week. If you want to go check out that episode, we're going to do an entire section, buy low, sell high at the very top, because Brandon and I are in agreement that this is a two-tier or a two-team in the top tier conference, and everybody else is is a significant gap below them. And that's, of course, the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks. As we sit here on December 15th, going into action on Thursday night, the Boston Celtics still hold the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, but they are tied in the loss column with the Milwaukee Bucks. The Celtics are 22-7. The Bucks are 20-7. So despite everything, I just keep thinking of Thanos. All this for a drop of blood. That's what I think about when I think about what the Celtics have done in the last 2 weeks. We've been kind of talking about this all year. I wrote a column about it, about you had to decide if you were going to bet the Celtics when they were at their peak, when they were at their zenith of value. You had to decide if you thought they were going to sustain what they did the entire season. They've hit a blip, to put it mildly. The last 2 weeks, the Celtics are 26th in offensive rating. Now, the defense has improved dramatically, and they did get a very encouraging come-from-behind win versus the Los Angeles Lakers on the second night of the back-to-back. So they lose to the Warriors on Saturday and got just pantsed. They spend the night in LA. They have an LA nightlife game where they basically get handled by the Clippers pretty easily. And then they come back and they blow a huge lead versus the Lakers and then stage a wild comeback in overtime. Thanks for killing the under, Celtics, in that Celtics game. This is a really interesting spot as we talk about this from a betting perspective, Brandon, because the question that we kind of have to approach is, one, do we think that this was a West Coast road trip only influence without Al Horford, as the Celtics fans reminded me about 7,000 times over the weekend? They're still plus 340 to win the title. The Bucks, meanwhile, at FanDuel, sponsor of Buckets, are plus 480, almost plus 500 to win the title. What is your basic take on buy low, sell high, Celtics and Bucks?
Yeah, so let me just stick with the Celtics here starting out, because I think my take on the Celtics is I'm selling on buying anything new on them right now. I'm not panic selling all my stock in them.
Right.
Boston is really good. Boston is going to be there in the end. They're going to be a contender all the way. I am not panic selling by any stretch, but I can't buy right now any of the prices that are out there on this team. And I think what's interesting is, so when I look at the profile, the shooting numbers, even with this 2-week ice cold stretch, the shooting numbers are absurd for the season still. They're second in 3-point percentage, they're fourth in 2-point percentage, and they're second in free throw percentage. The bench has been just red hot shooting all year. That sort of thing is bound to regress and is starting to regress a little bit. Al Horford, yes, he missed those games. Guess what? Al Horford's going to miss some games. Like, this is part of the Al Horford equation. And I'm not saying injury history or whatever. No, you just had a long, grueling playoff run, and this is your old player, and Al Horford's really, really good, but he's going to miss some games. You need him to get him there at the end. So I think what's fascinating, the defensive profile on this team was rough early on. Rough relatively compared to what we expected. They're top 10 now. Like, the defense is coming around. Still no Time Lord yet. The offense, I think, is going to be good. I don't think that they're going to be number one for the season. I certainly don't think they're going to be the outlier number one that they have been. And it's interesting. I kind of put them as, I think the offense is trending toward they end up something like 5th or 7th or somewhere in that range. And the defense is trending back towards top 5, especially once they get Time Lord back. And I put them in my rankings, offense 7th, defense 4th. And I look back at last year's team. Yep, that's what they were. That's what they are. Like, I think at the end of the day, the hot shooting and the great offense basically balanced out the slow defensive start and got us to where we're at. And they're very good, and they have been very good, and they will stay very good. And I don't think that they are super duper elite.
I think it's really interesting. I have questions about the common sense approach on this team, which is essentially what you've said. And that's what, like, the more rational Celtics fans have said, which is like, look, yeah, we're probably not going to shoot this way the entire season, but the defense is going to get a lot better when we get Robert Williams back. The offense will get a little bit better in terms of shot quality with Robert Williams back because of what he puts at the rim. Like, so it will balance out. Here's my problem with that, because I've thought a lot about this. It was illogical to expect the Celtics to be the number one offense in NBA history for a solid third of the season. Okay. That was like an irrational outcome. So if we have an irrational outcome already baked into this team's performance, what you're saying is the irrational outcome is fine, but that the rational outcome of the defense improving is certain. You're not saying this, but like, that's part of like the kind of inherent logic. And where I get to is I'm like, but what if it doesn't? And what I keep going back to is this team was miserable and mediocre on January 23rd last year. And then for 6 months, they were the best team in basketball. They made the finals behind an elite defense and an offense. And then this year, they've been the best team in basketball behind an elite offense and what until recently was an defense. So like, where I keep getting to is I'm like, do we honestly know who the Celtics are? Because I'm not sure I do. Now, that you can't throw out these games just because they don't make sense with your priors. That's ridiculous, right? Like, you could say like, well, Matt, didn't you just underrate the offense? I didn't underrate the offense. I expected it to be exactly what it's been. Like, no changes to the real roster. You could say like, well, they had Malcolm Brogdon. Okay. Very nice player. Love the move. Great trade. Malcolm Brogdon does not rate. This is the same thing I was doing with Al Horford, where it's like, look, guys, I have loved Al Horford since he was a rookie on the Hawks. That man has made the playoffs every season but one of his career. He is everything I love about the NBA. A consummate professional who does his job, doesn't complain, and doesn't get anyone fired. I love Al Horford. Would die for Al Horford. However, you can't be like, well, he's why we had the best offense in basketball. No. That's not a thing. You can't just be like, well, the only reason that our offense slipped was because Al Horford. No, like there's a little bit of regression here. So where I kind of get to it, if we're going to talk about betting the Celtics, I think there is a likelihood that the value will get better for you as a bettor. That if you're just like, look, regardless of this first third of the season, because I think the best way to maybe approach it is this. You kind of mentioned it there, Brandon. This provides such a buffer for them. Like they're 5 games up on the division already. They are 5 games in the loss column up on the Nets. And if you're like 5 games over the next 60 games, or really it's more like 50 games. And the answer is like, yeah, if you win at this level, 5 games is a lot to try and catch up. Doesn't mean that the Nets can't. I bet the Nets didn't win the division because I like the number on it. But they have already built in such an advantage that they should be a top 3 seed. They're going to be a contender, but they are amongst the contenders. I'm more interested because you have in our notes here that you want to buy a little bit of Bucks.
So I do want to respond to one thing on the Celtics, then I'll get to the Bucks. I do think, to be fair to the offense, you called it the team that went into the finals last year. You called it kind of an offense with this amazing number 1 defense. The numbers didn't say that. The numbers, we had that whole thing from January 29 forward. The numbers told us they were historically amazing number 1 defense, but also the number 1 offense with what felt like outlier shooting at the time. So number 1, not So, and granted, it fell off in the playoffs, and that was like the last taste in our mouth. They played the Bucks. That mattered, it turns out. They played the Warriors. They played some really good defenses. Of course, your offense falls off in the playoffs. This is what happens because you're playing the other great teams. But it was not They were very good. And I think, too, it's important to clarify, were the Celtics, if the Celtics had been what they were for 6 weeks for the whole season offensively, that would have been a wild, unpredictable outlier. It's not as much of a wild, unpredictable outlier for it to do that for 6 weeks. Every team has hot stretches for 6 weeks, and every team has terrible stretches for 2 weeks. Maybe it's not Al Horford. Maybe it's not LA Nightlife. Maybe they just had a bad stretch for 2 weeks because in the NBA, you shoot a lot of baskets and sometimes you hit the rim and they go out, and that's what happens. So, I think we have to be careful to go too far to the extreme on either side. They're very good.
They're very good. My problem just keeps getting back to the talent, which, I'm usually on the other side of this. It's about the combination of guys. It's about the formula. It's about the beauty of basketball, the jazz. And instead, with this team, I'm just very much like, okay, yeah, but look at the greatest offenses in NBA history and look at who they had. And then look at these guys. And Jason Tatum is awesome and deserves to be in the MVP discussion. We'll get to him in a minute. And Jaylen Brown's awesome. But Jaylen Brown's not as good of a shooter as he's been. He hasn't even shot well from 3. That's what's crazy. They're just making everything on the mid-range. Al Horford, Derek White in particular is a good example of this. All of these guys are so far above expectation. Yeah. And a chart in that column I posted. So for me, it's you're right that the offense has been good. It was very middling in the playoffs, which is where I was kind of referring to. Yes. But a lot of it just gets into I can't get there with comparing the offensive rosters that we have around the league to this one. And that's the problem, is that sounds like I'm saying these guys suck. They're not. They should be a top 10 offense. They just shouldn't be number 1 with a bullet. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think especially that is amplified in a playoff setting, which is what we're ultimately talking about here. We already know they're going to dominate the regular season. Yeah. And when you get to the playoff setting, we already know that the version of the Celtics we've seen has come up a little short. I think Brogdon actually will help more in a playoff setting than what, and I think you agree with that, as we talk about Brogdon, you don't move the needle a lot. They did miss specifically the drives and the skills that he adds to their team. So I think that helps. But again, that helps does not mean number 1 with the bullet. So let's do Bucks, because the Bucks are the other way. The Bucks defense has been out of this world, amazing, good, regressing a little bit now, but still number 1 effective field goal percentage against.
They smash the rebounds. They don't let you get free throws. They don't turn you over because that's the Bud thing. Like they're going to defend that way. But the defense is awesome. Brook Lopez, the favorite for defensive player of the year. I personally think Giannis is still a good bet there. I see a plus 750. I think as the season goes on, at some point, Brook probably will miss some time because he usually does. Giannis's usage is a career high right now. And I think it's been a little too much, actually. Giannis's numbers overall they're not great for Giannis. They're great, but they're not great for Giannis. They're not MVP level for him. And we've seen him maybe struggle to carry a relatively mediocre offense so far. They are very on offense so far. But I think Chris is back now. The offense is going to get better. I think Giannis' efficiency will return as he drops from 38 and 40% usage nights back to what he really should be doing. He's not really meant to be the LeBron or James Harden type guy to just be like, oh, it's Giannis, just let him do everything. Like that's really not what his game is supposed to be. We've seen them fail in the playoffs when they tried to get to that level or when they had to if Middleton was hurt. So I think the offense is obviously going to get better. Giannis should get more efficient. He always does. He usually makes a big push somewhere around the middle of the season. Middleton is back now. I like the Giannis DPOI because I think he's going to be able to put more into his defense as the load evens out. And I just think this team is really, really good. We knew they were good. They've been really good anyway. I couldn't believe when I saw the standings. Oh, we're tied with the Celtics after all that. The drop of blood thing. It's like we're right here. So yeah, I'm in on the Bucks. I think everyone should be in on the Bucks. I think it's very obvious.
I can't believe I'm going to do this. I'm going to push back against you as somebody that has a lot of Bucks futures. I'm good with my position. I'm not looking to add more, and I don't think now is a good time. I want to real quick note on, and we can talk about this a little bit back and forth because I know you'll have a response. On the Giannis DPOY thing, here's what I would caution. Part of your cap on that is I think Brook misses some time because Brook's been the leader at DPOY. I had a voter last night ask me about Brook Lopez and like, hey, is he as good as like the numbers say that he is? And I was like, yeah, he is really that good. Because he was like, I watched him the other night. He was amazing. And he was like, do the numbers kind of back that up? And I was like, by a million degrees, yes.
Yeah.
The answer of like, will Brook miss time is, I think you're right on that, which is why I like other guys for DPOY. The key though, when Brook missed time last season, the Bucks defense wasn't quite as good. And what I found when I dug into the Giannis MVP thing is when Brook's out, Giannis plays a lot more 5, and Giannis is not as good as a center. It's surprising, but because they're still going to play drop. They'll switch some, but they're still going to play a healthy amount of drop because that's what they're built to do. They have the personnel to do it effectively. And Giannis isn't quite as good in drop coverage. So the numbers may slide a little bit. And if that narrative gets into the ether of, hey, Brook went out and the defense got a little worse, I think that could, even if it doesn't help Brook, it might hurt Giannis. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think that's true. I think part of my cap is not even as much. I think you're totally right. Like, look, we saw that was part of why I like the Bucks coming into this year is, hey, Brook Lopez is back. The defense is going to be great again because it wasn't last year.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's more with defensive player of the year. We've talked about this a lot in the past. It's such a reputation thing. And I just wonder how many other voters there are, like the one that you talked to, that are going to be like, I don't know, man, Brook Lopez. Like Giannis is a defensive player of the year. We already know he's really great. The Bucks are great. Maybe I'll vote for Giannis actually, because OG Anunoby, he's the second favorite right now in most books. I think it's a similar thing. It's very rare in history. I did the work on it before the season. Guys don't go from not even all defense to defensive player of the year. You just don't. There's very little process. Like Marc Gasol did it, and there's almost nobody else in the last like 20 years. I think Brook Lopez, I think Anunoby probably make all defense. To go to defensive player of the year is a big jump. The name brand matters. So I think that's kind of my Giannis thing. But I like the profile overall. Let me ask you this. We agree this is this 2-team tier. Are the Bucks number 2? Are the Bucks 1B? Or are they 1A or number 1 for you? Where do they go in the tier?
Oof, that's good. I think they're 1A.
Me too.
Because I think in the playoff setting, what and I will tell you, after 2 years of our stressful podcasts about this team. Well, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get myself in a position where I have started looking at the Bucks as pocket aces. And my strategy with pocket aces is you have the best hand in poker, get your money in, because unless you are a good enough player, which I am not, to use them effectively, you should get your money in with the best hand when you have it.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do is I want all of my Bucks stuff up front, so I do not have to talk myself into betting the Bucks on a nightly basis versus the Boston Celtics and lose even more of my hair. Like, I want to lower my stress threshold for how this team frustrates me with their shooting. That's in the playoffs, though. And the reason I don't necessarily know if this is a buy spot for the Bucks is the strength of schedule. So the Milwaukee Bucks are this season, they are obviously, as we mentioned up front, they are tied with the Boston Celtics in the loss column. They are 20-7 with the 5th best overall net rating in the league. It's a little surprising that they're only 5th in that category. They are 2nd in defensive rating. The Cavaliers and them are basically every other night. The Cavs and Bucks are going back and forth. They are just 18th in adjusted offensive rating at dunks and threes. Their overall strength of schedule is 30th. They have had the easiest opponent schedule so far, and it's been home heavy. They've had a home heavy, easy opponent schedule, including the 28th ranked offensive strength of schedule. So the defenses they were facing have been the 28th toughest, and they are still just 18th. They are 30th in defense, but in defensive strength of schedule. But I'm fine with that because like the eye test checks out, right? And this is what I always say: like you beat up on the bad teams. This is how the Bucks, put up the numbers. But if we're analyzing overall strength, it is likely that Milwaukee will lose some more games or go through a bad stretch as the schedule gets tougher, even as those provide more opportunities for us to find like, hey, you know what? I still really like them in a playoff matchup. So for me, they are not a sell right now, but they are definitely not a buy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I see a plus 310 to win the East. That's an implied 24%. I have the Bucks Celtics very much in a tier of their own.
Yeah.
Like I have, I think pretty clearly you'd take Celtics Bucks versus the field in the East by a wide margin at this point. I have it like 3-1 basically. I put that number closer to 35 or 40%. So I think there's value on the number, but I think that you're right. I think that it's not necessarily a buy low spot here. They're not low, but I think that there probably will be a buy lower spot later. And we know what the Bucks are and what they're going to be. My numbers like the plus 310. They like by definition then a plus 600 to win a title I see out there. My numbers like it, but I don't think I'm going to like getting that ticket any less later. Like barring a major injury, I'm going to still like the Bucks team. I agree. Pocket aces is great. And I played a lot of poker before. At pocket aces, your temptation is to sit on them and wait and hope someone else gets something kind of good. So that way you can really milk it out. And then guess what? Someone does, and then you lose. You got to just get your money and get out. And I think that the pocket aces are going to be there. They're going to be the favorite later, and there might be a better chance to buy on it. So I think you've talked me down a little bit. I still want to buy in on the Bucks, but I think there may be a better buy spot later. Should we talk Jason Tatum here?
I'm going to let you. I have given my speech on it. I have given my conversation on it. People know my position. I have not been like, I have a Tatum position with some parlays. It's very small. It's basically built out like, I have some bets that are basically if I'm wrong. I bet a lot of if I'm wrong bets that to balance out my if I'm right bets, which are, bigger ROI. I will give you the floor to talk about whether or not Jason Tatum is a buy right now or a sell for most valuable player in the NBA.
Do not bet on Jason Tatum right now to win MVP as the MVP favorite. I don't understand it. Like, how have we not learned the lesson by now that just because you have the best record in the league doesn't mean that your ostensible best player is automatically the MVP? It's just not what happens. And by the way, it's not going to matter in 50 games anyway. We need the team at the end of the year to have the best record and to have their best player and the best player to be deserving of MVP. That's the important part that we kind of don't seem to include with Jason Tatum. Like the numbers, I know box plus minus is my number I go to a lot at BPM at Basketball Reference. It's flawed. All the all-in-ones are flawed. Jason Tatum for the season is 17th in BPM. He's right between, for reference, Pascal Siakam and Desmond Bane. Pascal Siakam, Jason Tatum, Desmond Bane, MVP favorites, as we all know. Like, come on. Jason Tatum is very good. You like EPM better. I think he's something like 7th or 8th in EPM. He's wonderful. He's terrific. He's been great. The Celtics are awesome. How is he the favorite right now when he's clearly not even close to being a top 5 player? And the Celtics, you're buying the Celtics at their peak value right now, where they, as great as they've been, they're still tied in the loss column with the Bucks and like barely a couple games ahead of multiple West teams. The Celtics can only go down from here. Jason Tatum has been very good. I don't get it. 38-4, very good numbers. I don't even think that he's necessarily a first team all NBA choice right now. I think it's ludicrous that he is MVP favorite.
They're gonna find you, man, and it's
they're welcome at Wheaton Brando. Give me all your Jason Tatum comments. I think it's ridiculous that he is an MVP favorite. I think he can get. We got the ballots. He'll get on a ballot. Hooray for making the back of the ballot. Look, I don't get it, but I made my MVP ballot just to kind of say, okay, well, where would I put him? At Wheaton Brando, come at me. He's not in my top 10. I don't think he's a top 10. You don't have to have an MVP candidate just because you're the number 1 seed. He's not on the list. There are Luka, Jokic, Steph, Giannis, Embiid, Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, Zion, Ja. I take them all for MVP. They all rate better. I don't care. Jason Tatum, look, maybe you disagree with that. Don't bet on whatever the stupid short number he is. Don't bet on it right now. It's a terrible bet. He might win. He could win. But don't bet at this terrible short favorite number right now.
ESPN's gonna be publishing a straw poll here in a few days, and I was one of the people polled for it. So I'll go ahead and say what mine was. I had Giannis 1, Curry 2, Luka 3rd, Tatum 4th, Embiid 5th. I will push back a little bit from this, and this is not just to keep the Celtics fans out of my mentions, but look, you're averaging 30 points on the best team in the league. You're averaging 30 points per game and now look, 30 points is not what it used to be. It used to be like we'd have 1 or 2, and we have so many guys averaging 30 this year. It's wild. The of the guys that are in MVP consideration, Embiid, Luka, Giannis, Tatum, and Curry all averaging 30. Donovan Mitchell's at 29.2, not far behind. I am willing, if you are the type of voter that's not going to care as much about the advanced metrics, that to you winning is paramount. That's okay. That's a paradigm. Like,
sure.
My thing with MVP is as long as you have a consistent definition of how you define valuable, I'm okay with it. And if you're like, I'm not going to use the numbers, to me, I watch the game and I see who wins and who is most impactful towards them winning. Then you're going to feel like it's Jason Tatum. He's averaging 30. His numbers are great. His efficiency is awesome. He is a great defender. Not a good one, a great defender. He's not DPOY category, but he's not like the other side of the earth from it. He is closer to DPOY than average. To me, he absolutely, like, he deserves to be on the ballot. He does not deserve to be the number 1. Part of this is tough because, so like the Mavericks are under 500 right now, right? They're back at 500 after the win the other night. I still kind of think the Mavericks, based off of their win profile, are probably going to stabilize and wind up over 500. Luka, with the numbers that he's putting up for an above 500 team, it's very difficult not to say how valuable that is. It's in the modern construct of how, like, this does get tough. I get it if you're one of those people that's like, I'm sick of the numbers. Like, I care about if your team actually wins or not. But the reality is that we're seeing this more and more. A team winning or not is more based off of how the team plays. It's hard for guys to carry one-on-one. I think it's harder now. This is a superstar driven league, but everybody's got a superstar. And so it's really more about how your team plays together that determines whether or not your team is really dominant. And I agree with you. The numbers are too short right now. If the books were as skeptical as we are, and they were putting him 5-1, right? Then I'd be like, come on, he's the number one. He's the best player on a team that's been the number one offense.
Yeah.
We'd be talking about it. But
no, I mean, look, literally a week ago on this very podcast, my argument was, hey, you know who you should bet on for MVP? Zion Williamson, because he's the best player on a 1 seed. That's literally the thing we're saying. If you are a voter and Devin Booker was your number 1 MVP choice last year because he was the best player on the best team, fine, vote for Jason Tatum. Similar criteria. Tatum's better than Booker. I'm not even saying that. That's fine. I understand that criteria is out there. This is a betting podcast. Zion, to be the best player on a 1 seed was 120-1 at the time. Jason Tatum is like 2-1 or 3-1, wherever you're betting it. You can't bet at that number. I agree. If he was, I wouldn't still take it at 5-1. If he was a longer number, we'd be making the argument. Hey guys, the Celtics have been really good. Jason Tatum's pretty good. 30 points a game is a lot. That's going to win some votes. He shouldn't be the favorite. It's a long way to go. I don't know. Our back-to-back MVP is 20-1 at some books right now and is leading in pretty much all the advanced special happy metrics. I'd rather take that bet myself.
Can't get there. He's not going to score enough points.
I knew that would make you happy. Okay, so
Cavaliers.
Yeah, if we're fading the Bucks at all, the Cavs perhaps are the way to do it. So where are you on the Cavs right now?
You and I had this big debate in preseason on our how to bet division. You like the Cavs, and I was like, Brandon, the Bucks always win the division. I was like, Brandon, the Bucks always win the division. Always. They would do it every single time under Bud. They're an auto lock. You can't get a good number on it, so you can't bet it, but you can't bet against it. And now it's December 15th, and here I am, and I'm about to tell you that there's value on the fucking Cavaliers to win the division. Because look, my numbers really like you talk about your numbers. My numbers really like the Cavs. I have the Cavs rated 4th in power ratings. The Bucks are 11th, and that's because of that half-court offense. Like their half-court offense just isn't good. A lot of these games, the Bucks are winning by just running the ball down the other team's throat. Now, if you want to say like, doesn't that overinflate for half-court? I think it does. The Grizzlies are a good example of this. My numbers think the Grizzlies are very much like pretty good. They're second in the Western Conference. They win all these games. I've started betting them blindly at home as a favorite. I'm on them again versus the Milwaukee Bucks as we enter Thursday night. We'll see how that one works out when you listen to this. They're plus 380 to win the division. That's probably good value. The offense has really fallen off a cliff, which is a bit concerning, right? And that's going to make it tough. One of the things I think you have to ask yourself is just, do you think the Cavaliers can be as consistent as Milwaukee is? Because Milwaukee, very hilariously, they will have a night where they won't shoot well and no one will be like, they won't overwhelm you. They won't look incredible, but they'll beat the Pistons by 15. They'll be favored by 11. They'll win by 15. They'll be favored by 12 versus the Magic, and they'll struggle for most of the game, and they'll hit one stretch of good play in the fourth, and they'll win by 13. Like this is who the Bucks have been. I don't want to bet it, but if you're like, hey, I don't really believe in the Bucks regular season wise, I can't sit here and be like, no, you cannot bet Cavaliers. I just can't. The numbers are what the numbers are.
Yeah, and I think it's important here. I think this is a regular season team that we're buying on. The Cavs playoff futures. Well, okay, so we'll come back to that. But I agree, regular season. I'm probably not even going to add a lot of stock here because I got a lot of Cavs stock over the summer already. I got overs. I've got JB Bickerstaff Coach of the Year. That's at 15-1 right now. I think that's very much in play as we look at like who are the top teams. I think that the top teams are pretty much who we expected. The Cavs are the top team that wasn't necessarily expected. So I think he'll be in play there. I like the division number. I just have it multiple times already there, but I agree plus 380, I think is a good value. Just straight up, the over-under is at 49.5. This is a profile of like a high 50s win profile right now. So again, not going to add it because I've already got some Cavs stock. But if you're fresh, have a division play or an over-under play, I think it's a good spot. What was remarkable to me looking at the profile, I liked the Cavs coming to the year because I thought the defense was going to be really good, set the high floor, and then we'll see how the offense goes. That's basically what we got. What I didn't realize is, at least by Basketball Reference's numbers, the Cavs are number one in defense. I've been like going crazy all year about how awesome the Bucks defense is. The Cavs have passed the Bucks in defense, which is like, it's whatever. It's nothing. It's December 16th or whatever day it is. It matters that the Bucks were that good and the Cavs also are that good already. So I know you like your Jarrett Allen Defensive Player of the Year stock. I'm a little worried just because Evan Mobley is the guy with the shorter odds and who gets the credit. And the thing I said earlier about, have you been here before? Neither Allen or Mobley has made all NBA or all defense before. We've got all, and maybe it's just, hey, you know what? It's going to have to be somebody new. These are all the candidates this year. Maybe that's the answer. I worry that those two might kind of split the vote for a team that's not super public and national yet. But I think you got to get some Cavs stock somewhere.
It's interesting because like Brooke and Giannis should split the vote, and Mobley and Allen could split the vote. Marcus Smart wins again. That's
oh god. Why would you do this right before Christmas?
An important right before Christmas. An important thing on the Cavs here. So like their strength of schedule isn't awesome, but the Bucks defensive strength of schedule is 30th. The Cavs is 18th. So it is considerably better. And when you face these elite defenses, you're going to get dragged down. So what we kind of see here is like neither one of these teams have faced the elite offenses consistently, but the Cavaliers have faced a tougher one and they have a better result with a defensive rating of 0.5 better than Milwaukee. Now, again, over the last week, those two have they flip-flopped a couple of times. These are still the elite defenses in the NBA. Pelicans surprisingly close behind, but I think we can agree that these two teams are better. I think it's interesting that Donovan's not really getting much push for MVP.
Yeah.
And I get it. There's a lot of talent on this team, so that may just be the end point of it. But like the numbers here are, it's 29, 4, and 5. So like the box score is probably not good enough, but he is shooting 50, 43, 89. So like he's within range of a 50, 40, 90 season, scoring 30 a game.
Yeah, pretty and the advanced metrics are really strong too. Like the advanced metrics and the BPMs and EPMs and VORPs, like they're all up there, because I think what's a little underestimated maybe in the profile of him, he's doing a lot for that offense. Like we know Darius Garland and we know Jarrett Allen. They made the All-Star game. We know Evan Mobley. There are all these other guys we know. The offense is Donovan Mitchell, and like the fact that they are a top 10 offense, that is Donovan Mitchell. We need more Darius Garland. Like he hasn't been good enough this year from what they've been. Jarrett Allen's not getting some of those quite as easy buckets as he was. Look, Donovan Mitchell is not going to win MVP. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it would be extremely a long shot. However, if you can cash out, I think it is a great spot to buy low on a cash out play, literally for the exact thing I just slandered Jason Tatum for. The Cavs are right there, and it's very plausible 3 weeks from today, the Cavs could be the 1 seed in the East with a 30 points per game score. It's right there. It's the exact same Jason Tatum argument.
I love this take. This is a great take.
He's 40 to 1. If you can cash out, why a month from now when the Cavs are the 1 seed and he's the Jason Tatum, he's not going to get to be the favorite. He's not going to win. But when you get to 5 to 1 or 8 to 1 or something like that, and then you cash out and take your money and go, don't trick yourself later. Remember the rest of the take, which is he's going to lose. Yeah. Don't hang on to the ticket. But look, if it was a month ago and you could buy Jason Tatum at 40 to 1 to be the leading scorer on the 1 seed, we would have told you to do it. So it's that.
All right, let's move on to a couple of the teams here. We're going to go through these a little bit quicker. The Brooklyn Nets, you're selling. I'm buying. God help me. Why are you selling?
I don't know. I just have a hard time believing in them. The profile to me, I need to watch a little more of them. The defensive profile is like, okay, so help me out. Here's the defensive profile. I like the shooting percentages and the big picture, 4 factors, all that. So they are second to last in 3-point percentage defensively, which we know is a little unpredictable, but second to last, not great. But they are the number 1 defense against 2-point percentage in the NBA without an elite rim protector, unless Nick Claxton and or Ben Simmons just became that overnight and I haven't caught up yet. They're number one in free throw percentage defensively, which is probably a fluky thing. Yeah. Like it doesn't make sense to me to be so polarized. All three of those numbers, they don't rebound at all. They're not going to rebound. That's not the profile of the team. Rebounding is a defense thing also. Like they're borderline top 10 offense and defense. Sure, the offense is exactly what I thought. KD's making shots. The shooting numbers are all good for the team. I don't buy the team. To me, we just did Cavs. The Cavs are the number 3 in the East for me and much closer to 1 and 2. And the Nets are just a drop to all the other teams. And they're in all the other teams. The East kind of sucks after that. So sure, they can be in the mix. I buy them as a win a playoff series team, or KD goes nuts for a while and you knock off one of those teams. But I'm seeing like a plus 650 to win the East, which is a 13%. No way for me. Like I'd put it 5% or below. If I was going to play a Nets play at all, 5-1 to make the play in, I think is a better play because I don't think they have any real shot at a top 3 seed. And I think they could be within a few games or a couple of weeks KD injury from falling down. I know all year long, your power rating has loved this Nets team. I know they love the half court offense. So sell me on what you like about this squad.
All right. God help me. You know what a lot of it is, Brandon, is that Nick Claxton's really fucking good, which is not, it's a little surprising. He has made major strides on both ends of the floor and he's not getting enough credit. Royce O'Neal's having a really good season. They've upgraded the perimeter defenders enough. So let's take a little bit of a holistic look at this because you mentioned some of the numbers. Let's just look at like a holistic approach here. Second Spectrum's got them at the 9th best effective field goal percentage allowed, so 9th lowest. So the Bucks are number 1, the Celtics are actually number 2, and that's indicative of that their defense is going to continue to regress. Cavs are 3rd. You got Wizards, Mavericks, Clippers, the Kings, surprisingly, but the Kings allow like a way higher expected mark. This is the big key here. Brooklyn's 9th, and they've only allowed 1 percentage above that. So here's what you kind of got is this is not a number that's likely to regress. It's right about in line with where it should be. If you talk about the way that they play, they're really good defensively at pressuring at the edge with switches and then collapsing down. And they're selective, in my opinion, on what shooters they leave open. So they are better at knowing they have very high KYP. They know their personnel. And that to me helps. I don't think they can be an elite defense. I do think that this looks more like, because especially when you dig under when you get under the hood and you look at like, okay, but where are all these numbers coming from? This was like the shocker for me is when I really started to be like, man, fuck, I think the Nets are good. They are 6th in half court defensive efficiency. And that's a big freaking deal. Their problem is that they have turnovers, which lead to transition stuff. The stuff that they can control, half-court offense, half-court defense, transition offense, they're top 10 at. And that formula to me is really good. I think they're higher than the 13% mark. I bet them already to win. I bet them to win the division as a very, very long number, basically based off of like, what if the Celtics did drop off a cliff? That was the bet. And beyond that, though, I do have a Celtics. I've started including Nets in the finals matchup parlays. I have a bet on the Nets to win the Eastern Conference. They are, to me, a legitimate contender. You can't be like, yeah, but who's their guy? It's Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
And the supporting cast, a lot of it is their numbers are also warped by early season. The offense wasn't good enough and the defense wasn't good enough because they were missing key guys. In particular, they were missing Seth Curry. Joe Harris has been a real all over all the place. I think they probably make a trade. I think they need one big man off the bench because they're having to play a bunch of young guys. Jacques Vaughn's doing real work. Like he's doing real work here. I don't trust them because of Kyrie. I don't. But the value is the value. And the rest of the team has a good vibe. They're playing together. And to me, it feels very much like those guys kind of got together and was like, we're not going to let this nonsense ruin our season. So I have a little bit of faith in the Brooklyn Nets. Let's skip Sixers. We don't know who the Sixers are yet. Tyrese Maxey's not back yet. Harden had just got back. We agree on that Embiid's a beast. I think he's probably he's good value for MVP. We'll talk about the Sixers another day. You're buying Raptors. You and I were talking about this in the group chat that we've got with our former colleague Raheem of the Ringer. I'm really curious to hear this. Why are you buying Raps right now?
Well, so I don't really know how to buy them. So maybe I don't think that the books are selling on Raptors. So I'm not sure that I really can buy them right now. I think the team is a little bit undervalued. Well, maybe they're not because the books don't have a value out there. But so they're 13 and 15. They're playing a little bit below what they should be by expected win loss. That should be flipped 15 and 13. The profile overall is just kind of in the middle. They're around the middle offense, around the middle defense. They're 15th in net rating. Why I'm buying them is because I do think it's a buy low spot on the season for them. Pascal Siakam has been wonderful for them. The numbers are really good, but he's only played 18 games. Look, I did the BPM thing earlier. He was above Tatum. If you took 10 games of Tatum out of the lineup, he's some valuable. It would be worse without that. Fred VanVleet has really not been very good this year. I assume he's going to get better. He's missed some time, hasn't been great. Precious has been terrible and missed a bunch of time. Otto Porter has barely played for them. That was, I think, a key bench pickup for them. It's Otto, so maybe he just never plays. I just feel like injury-wise, coming into the year, this is not surprising. I expected them to be a team I was fading because we thought the injuries might be there. They're running these guys into the ground. But I think right now, we should expect more from those guys. And to me, I looked for Raptors to make the playoffs. I thought that was going to be a nice buy because I think that they're a top 6 team. I think that there could be as high as the 4 seed in the East, depending on how things close out. The problem is I think the books think that too, and there's not really a number there. So I don't know if there's a way to buy the Raptors futures. I certainly don't need them for an East conference or anything like that. I buy the regular season. I think they're going to still finish solidly in that like 4 to 7 seed range.
Okay, I'm not going to bet anything because I have learned my fucking lesson about fading the Toronto Raptors. But I do want to note that there's a couple of things that are interesting with how this is going. By the way, you're right. There's a book out there that right now has yes minus 275.
Yeah, no, thank you. I don't need that.
Here's what's concerning. Raptors fans are really smart. Those are really smart basketball fans. And they're very passionate and they follow the team very closely. And if you go to the podcasts and if you go to Raptors Twitter, there's a lot of like, so last year I compared Raptors fans to the Who's down in Whoville because no matter how mediocre they looked, they just kept on singing. And they were so excited about Scotty and everything was great. This year, the vibe is entirely different. There is major worries about Scotty Barnes, who it's not just the offense. Like there were go if you were to see the tweets from last night's loss to the Sacramento Kings, it was why is Scotty's defense so bad right now? The offense has fallen off a cliff. Barnes was a huge reason that team made the surge that it did late in the season for them to sneak into the playoffs. That probably fully healthy was going to be Cavs. There is also a very strong we're still doing the playing starters 42 minutes a night thing. Nurse is still doing that. And Nurse is still arguing with the officials every single night about everything and throwing fits. And the act is wearing a little thin, at least to the fan base. And I don't necessarily know that the team is responding the way that you would want that, like you would expect them to respond. They've got some things in the pocket. So Gary Trent Jr. is probably a guy that gets moved. He wants the money. The numbers with him are awful and they've been frustrated. So I wouldn't be surprised if GTJ gets moved and they try and package some stuff together to get an upgrade. Again, I'm not going to take the plus 200 for them to miss the playoffs because the Toronto Raptors have fucked me one too many times. But I do think absolutely that they are a no buy right now and that it's not me saying this team is worse than maybe people realize. It's the fans, and those are people that follow this team, and that's a pretty like this is not the Bulls. I always know that the Bulls fans are going to think their team is terrible. The Raptors fans usually think their team is good, and so that to me is pretty telling. You're selling on the Hawks. Let's talk about them for just a minute. Tell me why you want to sell on the Hawks, and I actually want to push back on something you've got in the notes. Go ahead.
I just think they're not good. This has not worked out. The DeJounte Murray thing with Trae Young doesn't look good to me. the team just, I don't think they've figured out what they're trying to do. The offensive profile, that was the one thing that we knew that they'd be good at. And it's bad. It's really bad. They're bottom 10 in offense. They're bottom 10 in defense. They're bottom 5 in effective field goal percentage. Offensively, the thing that they're supposed to be able to do, DeJounte is hurt. John Collins is hurt. They don't shoot 3-pointers. They don't get to the free throw line. I don't like anything about the profile right now. I don't think they have any real good chance to be a top 6 seed and to secure a playoff spot. I think that they're doing poorly enough that they maybe could miss the play, and probably not, because the East, it's awful as you get down to the bottom. But man, I would be really happy to not have to count on the Hawks winning a play-in game or two. And I don't think that they like each other. I think Nate McMillan is way past expiration date. I in the notes, I think this is one you're going to push back on. I have fire Nate McMillan into the sun. I don't know what he's doing wrong, but I think we need a new solution here, and we don't have a roster solution. Plus 300 to miss the playoffs. I love that bet. It's my favorite bet on the podcast. I don't think the Hawks are making the playoffs. Maybe they make the postseason, but I will be very, very happy to be sitting on a plus 300. And it's all I need is the Hawks, this garbage team that doesn't get along, doesn't have a profile of what they're doing, to just lose a play-in game to, I don't really care. Pick somebody and they'll beat them.
All right, I'm going to challenge you. Are you betting plus 300?
I'm betting it.
Okay. I am not here to tell you that things are fine. That's not my thing. They're not. I have a question for you. Without looking, what's Trae Young shooting from the field this season? Guess.
Oh, just field goal percentage?
Yeah.
It's bad. I'll say 53%.
Okay. He's primarily a 3-point shooter. Are you talking about EFG? If you want,
yeah, probably. I don't even look at field goal percentage. Yeah, you're right. That's way too high. I'm thinking like true shootings and EFGs and whatever.
So the EFG would probably play around 50%. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, that's too high.
Yeah, he's at 45.6% effective field goal percentage. Guess what he's shooting from 3?
It's not great. I know that. And I'll say 31%.
28.5, Brandon.
Oof.
Now, here's the question though. Do we think that Trae Young is a 41% shooter from the field and 29% from 3?
No, here's the thing though. I've been a Trae Young stan. I had him 1B in my draft board. I loved him at Oklahoma. He is a volume 3-point shooter. He is a James Harden 3-point shooter. He's never been an elite shooter. He's not a 40% guy. He's not a 28% guy either. He's going to get to like 33 or 34.
His career is 35, right? Which is like, that's fine. For volume, that's fine, right?
Yeah, for the shots that he's taking and creating for himself and step back 40-footers, that's fine.
Even at 33%, I'd be like, look, he's having a down year, but like maybe he's just having a down year. 28.5% is like, no. Okay, Trae Young's going to eventually remember how to shoot. You mentioned the Nate McMillan thing. There was a note in all the reporting that was done over all of the stuff, I believe it was by Amick, that the players sided a little bit with McMillan. I talked to somebody that knows the situation, that knows that team. And the commentary was like, look, you can't let it get that bad with your superstar. That's part of the job of being a coach. But Nate wasn't wrong. That was the sentiment inside the building, which is like, you can't let it get to the point where Trae misses the game and then it gets out and it becomes this whole distraction. Your job is to avoid those. But Nate's initial thing was not wrong. That like trying to hold accountability, knowing whether or not a guy's going to be available, being accountable to your teammates, even if it's just like, hey, I can't go tonight. That's fine. All these types of things. That Nate wasn't wrong. And so I don't know how this works out. What I will tell you is I continue to feel like when DeJounte Murray and John Collins are healthy and they're on the floor without Trae Young, if you watch that team, you actually kind of go like, these guys are pretty good. They haven't had DeAndre Hunter, who, again, he misses a ton of time, and that may just be like they're injured, and that's
he's been terrible this year.
Well, he's been injured for most of it. So I don't like, that's a good reason I think to bet the no. To miss the playoffs, to bet the no playoffs bet is like they just might be hurt all year, and the guys that they have are not good enough to, like, Trae's not having a good enough season to pull them out. The other thing I would say though on your plus 300 to worry about is we've said this for 3 years, and so again this might be reason to fade this conception, but everyone around the league is like the Hawks are gonna do something. They've shifted, like the tone has gone from the Hawks are always making calls about John Collins, to the Hawks are actively looking to shake up the roster. And so we'll see what that nets. It may be worse, right? Your bet may look better later because it may wind up with a negative outcome. But I think it's like an interesting question. And
there's really no scenario where the Hawks go in the tank because they've already traded the draft picks. They're going to trade more probably when they do whatever that next move is. They're going to try. They're going to want to make the playoffs. So that's against the bet. Just plus 300 is implying 75% that they would make the playoffs. And I don't see it with this team.
There's no value on the Chicago Bulls for them to miss. There's no value on the Chicago Bulls. Like, there's no way to fade them. I'm assuming you, like every Bulls fan I know, is selling aggressively on the team though.
Yes. Since I believe the day that we traded for Vooch and then the day that we traded for DeMar. So is this where I do the victory lap on being right about everything?
No, because you were dead set on them being under last year, and I won. I won that one. I won them last year.
You did. Why do you like the Bulls right now?
This is a buy low spot. It's just a buy low spot. And I'm sorry, but if you're going to be in the market and you're going to try and find, you don't get to take teams when everything's swell. You don't get to take teams when it feels good. You don't get to take teams when you're very rarely going to find instances where the market doesn't realize a team is good. Or in this case, that a team is not as bad as they look. The live win total right now is 37.5 in the market. It's a little low. They're minus 115 to make the play-in. Don't mind that bet either. They could even win 37 games and maybe make the play-in.
Yeah.
Here's my thing. The underlying numbers don't say that this team is not as bad as the eye test. And so you kind of got to, this is a good question, is what do you trust? Because when you watch them, Bulls fans are tearing out their eyes and screaming and yelling, and it is bad. Fire Arturas and fire Billy Donovan and fire trade Zach LaVine, and the whole thing is terrible. This is the categorical low point of the current Chicago Bulls.
Yes, and just to affirm what you're saying, as a guy that lives in Chicago suburbs and has a lot of Bulls fan friends, it is catastrophic out here. Everyone could not be more out on this construction of the team. Trade everyone, fire everyone. People just want out on this team.
Yeah. So here's the problem. Okay. The Bulls at 11 and 16 are still 14th in adjusted net rating at dunks and threes. They're ahead of the Warriors. They're ahead of the Knicks. They're ahead of the Raptors. They're ahead of the Lakers. They're ahead of the Heat. They're ahead of the Hawks. They're ahead of the Wolves. Okay. They have the second toughest strength of schedule on the board. So let's combine this.
So far.
Yes. They have the 14th ranked adjusted net rating versus, and this is adjusted for how the opponents they played, right? So there is a tandem here. It's that they have been average versus a really tough set of games in which they probably should have lost most of those games. They've come out with a slightly above figure of plus 1.1. So they are slightly above where they should be based off of the expectation of the schedule. They have faced the number one toughest defensive strength of schedule. And a lot of that you can kind of refute by saying, yeah, because they play the Bucks and the Cavs twice, and they're going to have to play them again twice because they play in that division. And that's completely fair. If we look at, I'm going to check this. I have not checked this before I jumped on here. Chicago. Yep. It checks out. Chicago's win differential. They're currently 29th in that category. They're 2.2 wins worse than expected. So what I'm telling you is the Bulls can be a mediocre brand of garbage that Brandon wishes they would trade and get a 19-year-old weird player that's going to miss the entire season with injury. But when he comes back, which is what all of the Bulls fans want, that can all be true. And the Bulls can still objectively in the market be underrated at 37.5 with a minus 115 to make the play-in.
So, yeah, I think that's right. Here's my take. The Chicago Bull, I'm just going to piss off two fan bases at once. I'm just going to drop this onto the timeline and we're going to move on. The Bulls are the Knicks. I don't even have any notes. I don't care. You're mediocre. See you in the play-in. I hope the Bulls beat the Atlanta Hawks and win my ticket for me. I don't want to bet on Chicago. I don't need to bet against them. They're fine. They're average. They're going to make the play in. I don't care. Fans don't care.
Love it. Love it. All right. Long shot of the week. Before we wrap up, we always do our long shot of the week. I have a Rackham this week. We're going to combine segments because I got a mini Rackham. We're not doing all the awards. I just got 3 because I can't believe these numbers. At FanDuel Sportsbook, you could take Jared Allen to win Defensive Player of the Year, Bull to win Most Improved Player, as he had another fantastic performance and actually got to close the game last night versus the Toronto Raptors, and Steph Curry, who's going to miss, quote, several weeks. A few weeks, I think, is the word from Adrian Wojnarowski. It's not going to be a month long. Like, we're doing this again, Brandon. His MVP odds dropped to 2,600 today, Brandon.
Oh man,
like, we're doing this again.
Who cares that he misses these 3 weeks in the course of 8 months of the season? Like, if it's really 3 weeks, I expected a little longer. I did not expect that drop. That's wild.
Yeah. You combine Jared Allen, Bull, and Steph Curry. Jared Allen, Defensive Player of the Year. Bull, Most Improved Player. Steph Curry, MVP. These are all completely reasonable cases. This is my favorite guy right now for DPOY. This is a guy that I don't necessarily love. He doesn't fit our profile for Most Improved. I get it. It's just a matter of, like, everyone keeps talking about, wow, did you see Bull? And then Steph. This is the number, Brandon. I need to make sure I can figure this out. Okay. 3,196,700 is the number on that ticket. 3,196,700.
Bet $1 bet wins you $31,967 at that price.
Yep.
And by the way, I don't think FanDuel is going to let you put too much more than $1 on there, because I'm not sure that they need the liability for too much past that.
So they will, because I did put more than $1 on it.
Okay, well, there you go. You got it in already.
I already got it in. I'm going to put it in the app.
Look, we talked about Steph. We talked about Jared Allen earlier. Bull, love the dude, love the story. As great as he's been so far, and all the advanced metrics are pretty and happy and yay, 13 points and 7 rebounds. It's just like, somebody's going to care about the counting numbers, and 13 points at 7 is just not going to get it done, I think.
But imagine if I get to March and the other two are
yeah.
If I get to March,
it didn't work for us, but it could have worked for me.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to give you a long shot that, quite honestly, might be somehow longer, despite it not being anywhere near 3 zillion to 1 odds. So let me build to it here. You're just gonna hate this take so very much. So I dumped on the Hawks. I don't like the Hawks. We didn't do the Heat. I don't believe in the Heat. I don't like the Heat. I've never liked them this season. I thought it was going to be bad. The Wizards have lost 10 of 11. By the way, they're minus 300 to miss the playoffs. Pretty much free money. 538.com has the Wizards at 9% to make the playoffs. They're not going to win playing games. So I don't like the Hawks. I don't like the Heat. I don't like the Wizards. I don't like the other team either. But guess what? Charlotte Hornets, 300 to 1 to win the division. Let's go.
Okay, stop. We made this. I've gotten very good about not yelling at you for these bets. What the fuck is this?
$3 million to 1 bet. Let me make my case. So here's where this started. I in preparation for this podcast, I went standings down, top to bottom. Celtics, Bucks. I'm going through the East. We talked about this offline. I got to like 6 teams in, and I was like, oh, Heat. Oh, Hawks. Oh, Bulls. Where are the teams that are good? Who's the good team? Who's hiding down here? Who's further in the standings? That's why I kind of talked myself into the Raptors a little bit. Like, somebody has to win games. And I kept going and I kept going. And I was like, oh, I guess there's nobody. I got to the very bottom, and I got to the Charlotte Hornets, who are 4-17 since the start of November. They're dead last in EFG. They're bad at threes. They're dead last in 2-point percentage. They're terrible. I don't have any case for the basketball sense of this team. They are trash, awful. They should absolutely just tank the rest of the way. LaMelo Ball, who I know you absolutely hate, has played only 4 games so far. He's very clearly the best player on the team. Terry Rozier has been not good this year. Hopefully will be much better when he's not having to be the star on the team, and is not good at that. I was looking at, okay, could the Hornets, if they like accidentally ripped off a few wins, not even be good, but could they just like, oh, hey, the Hornets won 5 games in a row? Because that happens in the NBA. Could they get to like 35 wins and and be a play-in team. That's where I started. They're 18-1 to make the play-in. They need to play 500 ball the rest of the way. That gets you to 35 wins. Now you're in the play-in. Well, I expanded territory. They're 6.5 games back from the Heat and the Hawks, who books are basically treating as a coin flip in the division, which we did before the season. 6.5 in this division with no other good teams and nobody that I like is not the same as the 5-game Celtics lead you talked about. It's not the same because the Celtics aren't going to just suddenly lose 5 in a row. The Heat and the Hawks could both lose their next 5 in a row and everyone be like, yeah, well, they're not very good. So that's it. It's playing the number. I don't like the Hornets. I don't like the team. I don't like the coach. I don't like LaMelo that much. I like the 300-1. I hate the rest of the division. I'm fading the division. I'm playing the Hornets to win the division 300-1. I'm putting it in the app. It's a real bet. Let's go.
Wow. I am speechless. Here's what I would tell you. I think, you know what I think is more likely? The Wizards trade Bradley Beal and the team that they get in return makes a run for the division. That is more likely to me than the Hornets. Like
the Wizards make the run to the playoffs. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
With the Beal guys. Because all the guys that they got from the Westbrook trade, all the leftover parts, the Bartons and the Monty Morrises, all the guys that they got from that have been so good for the Wizards, losers of 10 of the last 11.
You know what's weird though? I mean, Beal and Porzingis have been out, right? So that's the thing.
Well, Beal is a walking out. Like Bradley Beal is the guard version of Anthony Davis.
Look, I'll just tell you, I saw them up close last night, and they hung in that game for a long time with a really good game plan versus the Nuggets. They let Nikola Jokic score, and everyone's like, "What?" The plan was make the Nuggets try and beat you with 2s versus 3s. It was a really good plan. They didn't double Nikola. They dared him to score 40. He did, and for 3/4 of the game, they were hanging in or had the lead. They shot 17 of 31 from 3 without Beal and Porzingis, with nothing on the interior, with Rui Hachimura, who's actually been really good this season, with him out, and they were within range. They just didn't have the energy on the back on the altitude road trip. I'm not saying the Wizards are good, but I am telling you that if you took Bradley Beal's contract and you flip that into players that can actually help, that team is better than Charlotte. So.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, look, it's the same take as mine. The take is the Heat stink, the Hawks stink. Is there anybody else that could possibly steal a very, very winnable division? Like you and I could, if we could realign divisions, we could talk ourselves into at least 15 other NBA teams to win the division here with the Heat and the Hawks as the other options. Like I just was trying to find somebody. If you want the Wizards instead, take the Wizards. It's a fade the Heat and the Hawks take. We'll see what happens. It's going to be garbage in 2 weeks. It probably already is.
We bet that no Southeast Division team makes the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's possible that if you could get one and then put in the play-in and then they lose.
All right, let's wrap it up. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you guys again on Monday for the recap episode. We'll likely, I would say that there's a good expectation we'll have results from the ESPN straw poll to be able to go ahead and break those down on that episode. We'll go over the most important covers with Albert and all that stuff, and we'll have best bets throughout the week. Make sure to follow Brandon in the Action Network app for all his dynamite plays. I'm tailing him on several this weekend. So go ahead and do that. We'll see you guys again next time. Thanks for joining us. Let's get buckets.